My name is Ewart Driehuis, and today's guest is Professor Patrick Bours, leading expert in behavioral biometrics and cybersecurity. With a PhD in discrete mathematics and over a decade at the Dutch National Communication Security Agency, Patrick now pioneers research at the NTNU University in Norway, exploring gait recognition, keystroke dynamics, and even detecting online grooming and contract cheating. Let's dive into the future of digital identity and trust. This is a new episode of Fusion Fireside.
Patrick, how did you become a professor in Norway?
That's kind of a long story. Let me start in the Netherlands. I did a master and a PhD, although it wasn't called master and PhD back in the days, a long time ago. And while doing that, I was involved also in teaching, and I was studying mathematics. I was helping students in other areas in management and with the mathematics exercises. And I like that kind of interaction. So after my PhD, I desperately tried to get a job in academia, miserably failed, worked for about 10 years for the Dutch government. I had a friend actually who was working there, and he said, hey, look at the newspaper next Saturday and there is an announcement. And so he helped me find that job. But after 10 years there, I had this idea that, hey, I still want to go back to academia. And by chance, I saw an announcement for a position in a small Norwegian town called Gjøvik. Nobody heard of that, but it is like 2 hours drive north of Oslo. 2 hours sounds like a lot, but it's just 125 kilometers only. And I didn't get a professor position there, not even an associate professor position. I got offered a postdoc position. But anyway, I was back in academia. I could do research, and that was interesting. And while we were doing the interview, it was already, okay, if everything goes fine and if everybody is happy, we can continue after the 3 years postdoc with a permanent position as associate professor. That was good for me. If not, my children were 2 and 3 at the time, 5 and 6 when I was done, they could still come back and school and everything would not be the biggest issue. But from the first day, Norway is a great country. The culture is great. Being back in academia was my dream anyway. And so there was never any doubt that we would go back to the Netherlands back then. And so now 20 years ago, that's how long we have been in Norway. Then I already had the associate professor position after 3 years. And in Norway, it's relatively simple. If you have done enough work, you can apply to become a professor. So simply, it's not like a job interview, there's a job available, but if you're qualified as a professor, you can become a professor. And there is obviously a committee that needs to evaluate that. And I did apparently enough that they said, oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, we can give you a full professor position. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
But so still from that time, you moved into the situation where many now consider you the father of behavioral analytics.
That's maybe a bit too much honor. If I look at the people in behavioral biometrics, the first person that comes to mind is Richard Nixon. Mark Nixon, not Richard Nixon. That's a different person. Mark Nixon from the UK. He has been working for many years, even before I started in biometrics. He was working on gait recognition, recognizing people by the way that they walk. Yeah. I would consider him as one of the founders of the field, or one of the big men. If I go to my area of specialty, which is looking at keystroke dynamics, so how we use the keyboard, even there, I know some names that are in Canada, Traore and Ahmed. They have been working in this area for much longer than me. If I want to be called the founder or the head or something, if you go local enough, if you just look at Norway, I could consider myself as the expert in behavioral biometrics. There is very little. It's a niche area, which I like, but it's a niche area, and so there is not too many people working in the area, and hence, yeah, sure, there I can claim some kind of fame.
Yeah. So, have you seen an increased interest in the field of behavioral biometrics?
Yeah, in the last years, and really then the last years, I'd say after Corona, there is an increased interest. When I started my research in behavioral biometrics, not 20 years ago, that was a bit here and there, not really focusing. But let's say around 2010, 11, I started in a field called continuous authentication, which wasn't new at the time, but I think that I took an approach that was interesting. There was very little interest in that type of research. Now, what is it, 15 years later, with a lot of machine learning improvement, I see a lot of other people actually trying to use the deep learning and that kind of machine learning to enter the field also.
Right. So that's interesting. You mentioned 20 years ago you started in this field, and I know many people with all the AI hype that has been going on since LLMs and ChatGPT and what have you, think this field only exists for a few years. What do you think of that?
The field of AI is obviously way older. It started in somewhere late 20th century. That is. The computational power was very small back then, and hence, even though the ideas were great and the ideas did not change a lot over time, they simply did not have the computational power to do all the work that we are doing now. The ideas of neural networks, they were known 50 years ago already. But obviously, with any research, it's going up and down. So there is a lot of interest, and then it goes down, and then it goes up again. So the founding fathers of that field, and don't ask me for the names there, I don't know those, but they were working on it like 50 years ago. And so it's not a new field at all. What is new is that the public out there gets to learn more about it. Sure, they hear about machine learning in that Google is using machine learning algorithms to come with suggestions. But now, indeed, with ChatGPT, that's completely new, and that's okay. Everybody can use machine learning. Anybody can use these AIs to generate an image, to get an answer to a particular question, to do whatever they want. It's become AI for the masses now, but it is not new at all.
Yeah, exactly. So the neural networks have been in existence for over 50 years, you'd say.
And that's what we're still using today.
Yeah.
The large language models is in principle a neural network.
Right, the mathematical principles are not new at all. So do you roll your eyes whenever people say that AI is super new, or do you just go with the flow?
I don't comment on that very much, but what I see is a bit concerning when we talk about large language models, generative AI. What I see is that people have absolute trust in what this AI is saying, because it's artificial intelligence, so it is intelligent, and so when it comes with information, people think that's true. Yeah. And that's very dangerous because as an academic, obviously, you have different sources where you get your information and you check everything. The general public isn't used to doing that. And very simple, if an AI is saying that, okay, I could ask, where would be a railway station nearby? And it could say, okay, the nearest railway station is, and maybe it has a correct, it's Amsterdam, Sloterdijk in this case, and it would say, oh, that's 100 meters away, while it is, in fact, 500 meters away. When I was on vacation a while ago, actually, we asked to go to an attraction, to a particular attraction. There were multiples that we could choose from, and the question was which was the closest. And we got a completely wrong answer there.
Wow.
But checking that kind of information at a second source, like Google Maps, that could tell me that, okay, instead of walking distance 100 meters, it's all of a sudden 2 kilometers. That's still walkable, but still it's a significant difference if I expect something. Right. So the danger is that people just, without any critique, just take the answer from the large language models, right, and just that's it.
Right. Yeah. So going back to your research field of keystroke dynamics, you have been working on this for a long time. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about it. What can you explain it for, let's say, lay people such as maybe myself, right?
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see if you keep nodding, then I'm doing a good job. Keystroke dynamics is in principle recognizing somebody by the way that they type on the keyboard. It's a form of behavioral biometrics, and behavioral biometrics looks at how you perform a particular task and extracts information about the person, you in this case. It's biometrics, and when people think about biometrics, fingerprint, face, it's to get access to your phone, to your laptop, to whatever, right? The keystroke dynamics can also be used for that. And I always sell it as it is two-factor authentication for free. You have your password, you type your password. Obviously, the system will check, is that your correct password? But what if I also measure how you type that password? Then I can use that as a second factor. If I would look over your shoulder and I would say, oh, your password is welcome42. And then when you're gone, I'm going to sit down and say, oh, yeah, let's log on. I'll type welcome42. The password is correct, but my way of typing is different.
Right.
And so I will not get access. But it doesn't stop there. I like to work in niche areas. So in my studies, I worked on something called insertion, deletion, correcting codes. That's a field of coding theory. And I was looking at completely different kind of errors that could occur. When I worked in the Netherlands, I worked in the area of asymmetric crypto and not the mainstream symmetric crypto. In Norway, I started working in biometrics. And again, not the mainstream normal biometrics, fingerprint and face. I've done work in that too. But I like a niche area. And so I took keystroke dynamics, behavioral biometrics, where there was not a lot of research on. That wasn't enough. So keystroke dynamics to get access, that's great. But when your laptop is open and you're still using the keyboard. So what if I use keystroke dynamics to actually remove access? Your laptop is open, I can use it, or somebody can use it, somebody is typing on it. I can register how the typing rhythm on that laptop is. And if that typing rhythm deviates too much from what your laptop expects from your typing rhythm, it could at some point say, oh, that's odd, I will lock the system. So again, me behind your computer would be, I would be locked out. So before I can send a nasty email to your boss, the system hopefully would lock itself.
That's amazing. So you can actually use keystroke dynamics as an inherence factor in something you are essentially. So something you know, something you are, and something you have, or some of the factors you have in multiple factor.
Yeah.
So it actually offers something you are.
Yeah. So something you are is the biometrics, and some people split something you are in something you are and something you do. The normal biometrics face and fingerprint versus the behavioral one, for me, it's the same. So something you are includes behavioral biometrics also.
Right. So how have these models evolved? You've worked on them for a long time. What did you work on for such a long time? Was it accuracy? Was it applicability to certain use cases? How did that?
Oh, there is always, the good thing with research is that whenever we do something, there are these small things that we did not solve yet. And so when we write a paper on something, there is always this section, future work, conclusions, this is what we came up to, future work, there are still some issues there. Very simple, keystroke dynamics. What if you switch from your laptop keyboard to your desktop keyboard?
Right.
What will that do to your typing rhythm? So we have to investigate that. What will happen to your typing rhythm if you write something in Dutch or in English? That will change your typing rhythm. What if you are typing in a particular application, let's say Word? You're typing a formal letter or something, that will be different than when you're working in Excel or when you're creating a PowerPoint or whatever. Your typing rhythm depends on a lot of things. What if you're in the morning, you're fresh and you're happy that you can work again and you're full of energy, but late afternoon, there has been a long day, a lot of stress, you'll be tired, your typing rhythm changes. All these kinds of different circumstances, there is still a lot of work that we can do in this area.
Right, I'm totally understood. It's kind of the same when you with your fingerprint. If you cut your thumb, you can't use your fingerprint anymore. So, and it's kind of the same with keystroke dynamics.
No, I wouldn't say that. Your fingerprint is stable.
Right.
If you cut it, sure, there is some issue locally, so where the cut is locally a problem, but it will grow back, and it will grow back in exactly the same way. with keystroke dynamics, keystroke is behavior, and you're not a robot.
Right.
So your behavior will change.
And
At any time. So even in a normal, even within, let's say, a short time span of 10 minutes or an hour or whatever, when you're typing, there will be differences in your typing rhythm. The issue is that the problem with behavioral biometrics is that there is what we call a large intra-person variability. So as one person, I have a lot of variation in my behavior. And there is a small interperson variability. So two persons will have a large overlap in their behavior. And still, out of that, we have to find the interesting information such that we can recognize somebody. The good thing is, if you use your fingerprint, get access to your phone, you give it once and that's it. It's only used once. Keystroke dynamics, when you're typing an email or when you're typing a report, you're having a lot of keystrokes. And that's where, at some point, behavioral biometrics is going to win. So
that's interesting. So let's talk about applicability. So what I love about science is that you build a fantastic framework that you can then use for real world use cases. So you've told me that you were working on some very interesting ones, including grooming. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, maybe short. Grooming is cyber grooming that we're talking about is something that an adult or a sexual predator, if I can use that name, is using to get in contact with a minor, with the goal to befriend that minor and later on sexually abuse that person in whatever form. That can be physical, that can be also online, whatever. So that's not that interesting. I've done a lot of research in this continuous authentication. At some point, I had a very good PhD student. When he was finishing in early 2016, I had to come up with a new topic that I could keep him a bit longer as a postdoc. And right around that time, I came across the story of Amanda Todd, a Canadian teenager who was 15 years old, I think at the time. She was chatting, and she wanted to be in contact with a lot of people around the world to make new friends. And she came in contact with this 18-year-old boy from the Netherlands, and they were chatting for a while. And at some point, she made a mistake. She sent a private picture to him. After that, he actually started extorting her, sextortion we call that. He started extorting her for more, show yourself on webcam, send me more pictures, whatever. She did not give in, and the story is very tragic, so I will not go into that. But we knew from our research in keystroke dynamics that beside all of this, that I talked about, the password protection and the continuous authentication, I can also extract other information, not identifying a single person, but getting characteristics of that person. Women and men, they type in a different way. Don't ask me what the differences are, but they type slightly different, such that we can learn a machine to make a distinction between a male and a female. Children and adults, they type in a different way. And so we knew all these kind of things, and we had done some small research, and so we could detect these kinds of things. And at some point, the person Amanda was talking to got caught, and he was apparently a 35-year-old male. So he was claiming to be an 18-year-old male. He was a 35-year-old male. And so the idea came that, okay, what if we would have watched the typing rhythm in that chat? At some point, we could have warned the girl and saying, hey, you think you're talking to an 18-year-old person? We analyze this as a 35-year-old person or an adult person. Let's talk about adult and child. That's easy. And there is a mismatch there. So we could have sent a warning. Never know what would have happened then, but at least we could have detected and warned somebody at some point in time. Unfortunately, that research didn't get funding, and so we had to find a different way. I lost the PhD student, but my interest in this research was starting, not in the least because my children were in the age of 12, 13 at that time, and so I want to protect my own children, obviously also. And so I started investigating this, and these cyber groomers, they don't just go out and say, hey, I'm 12-year-old Sophia, do you want to talk to me? Right now on camera, you see that I'm not 12-year-old Sophia, but in a chat, I can be that, right? But there are a number of groomers that just go out and say, hey, I'm a 40-year-old male. Are you interested in talking to an older person? Right? They claim to be an older person. They behave like an older person. I can't warn anybody. So at that point in time, we started actually drifting a bit away of what people think as behavioral biometrics, because we were starting to analyze actually the text that they were sending. And so I'm not sure if I should still call it behavioral biometrics or behavioral analysis, but potato, we do the same thing in the end. So we started now analyzing the conversation. So we trained the system to make a distinction between normal conversations and grooming conversations. And the same as what we did with this continuous authentication, where we evaluated each and every keystroke and determined that, okay, if that keystroke is a bit like I expect from the owner of the machine, the trust goes up, but if it's different, the trust goes down. Here we turned it around and said, okay, if the message that somebody is sending, it doesn't matter who is sending it, if the message that somebody is sending is dangerous, like, are you home alone, sweetie? The risk of the conversation will go up.
Right.
But if it's innocent, I have 2 cats at home, the risk will go down. So with every message now, I'll adjust the risk. And so the risk will go up and down. But if at some point it gets too high, then I can say, hey, this is odd, we have to warn somebody. That can be the person on the, well, we don't actually see who is the bad guy and who is the good guy. We follow the whole conversation.
Right.
We could warn a moderator if this is a moderated chat, or we could do some things.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. So apart from just the biometrics of it, you now start to detect certain aspects about the persons engaging in the chats. So you could characterize behavior suddenly in the chat.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I bet this is why at one time you started to think about fraud use cases as well.
That happened actually when I was contacted by Han, and he was working, and he was interested in this, actually one step back in this continuous authentication, this behavioral biometrics use case. But in both cases, the cases are on the one hand completely the same, on the other hand completely different. In principle, if I do research, I want to find, in this case, the odd one out, right? The normal conversations in grooming, that's the standard. I'm looking for the anomaly, the one that is different from the others. With fraud, it's the same. Most of the users are normal users. There's no fraud, but there are some anomaly cases where there is fraud. But you have to now look at the actual act of doing fraud or doing grooming. So I have to think about how would a groomer, how would somebody who's performing fraud, how would they act? And based on that analysis, I know what I have to look for. So it's not that okay, I'll just take all the data and I'll throw it in some kind of machine learning model and out comes something that is maybe that's the newer way of using machine learning. You asked about that before. The deep learning models, so the ones that is in between the normal machine learning and the large language model, the deep learning models, the convolutional neural networks, they just take in a lot of data. They see differences in that data and they will spit it out. It's not always what we are out after, and you have no idea what this black box is doing. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of that.
Right.
But that's my personal opinion.
So what you're saying is it would help if you had at least some knowledge of the frauds or the scams, so that you can model the behavior around the, let's say, the attack MOs.
Yeah. That's the whole thing. You have to think as, in case of a fraud, what is going to happen? And you can think of fraud at 2 different levels. You can look at somebody who's always performing fraud. He is distinguishing himself from the normal set of users. So at a global level, I look at how would a normal user behave and what would a fraudulent user be different in his behavior on his account. Alternatively, would be if I look at a specific user, it could be that he is involved in fraud in an involuntary way. So, for example, the Microsoft help desk calling you and doing things. You can compare it with that. In that case, I have to look at what is the normal behavior of that user. And in that normal behavior, can I at some point say that, hey, now that user is doing something very strange? For a normal user, I could, for example, look at what is generally when he's doing his activity online. If we talk about banking, when he's doing his online banking, when is he, what browser is he using, what the normal behavior is he using a laptop or a desktop, and so that generally won't change. So there is a user, you can imagine that he is Sunday morning, he's doing all his administration to get that out of the way, and he's very consistent in that. And so if all of a sudden for that user, it is on a Friday afternoon or late in the evening, something is happening. That's out of the ordinary for that user. But that could be a different user that always does his banking, his online banking on that time. So the fact that it is on Friday evening doesn't mean a thing. But for this user, it is out of the ordinary.
Right. And the same translates into, let's say, keystroke dynamics as well, right? So
in the last case, when I've been called a couple of times by these Microsoft help desks, and it's sometimes nice to play along to see what they are doing. And when I got them on the phone, they asked me to go to my browser and type in a particular text. So in principle, I'm typing in the link to a particular web page. And normally, I would go to a web page. I open the browser. I open a browser window. I'll type the name and then go. But they are really explaining it to me like, okay, type the A from Alpha. Type the S from Simon. And so that typing rhythm completely off from my normal behavior. Right. That would be an indicator that even another indicator would be that I'm not using that website ever. But the indicator is that my typing rhythm here is completely off, is completely different from my normal way of typing.
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah. So with these models and the applicabilities, we now talked about two use cases and how grooming and fraud are the same but also completely different. So what I'm wondering about is about the applicability of these. Do you ever talk to people who say, hey, listen, we would love to use these models, but what does it mean for privacy? What does it mean for regulations? What does it mean for... So how does that play into your work?
Obviously, we say, I'll take these things seriously, or we as academics. But I'm in the fortunate position that I'm an academic. And why do you do that research? Just because I can. Obviously, we have to factor that in. I can't do research if I want base research, great. But if I want research to be applicable later on, I can't just do anything and then just give it to a company and say, here, just make a product of that, because I might be doing things that are not allowed for the company. There is a difference in what is allowed for research in companies, luckily for me. But sure, we take that into account, but that at a lower level, so to say. The implementation should obviously be something where the company steps in and says, oh, I can't use this. What else could we use instead of this? As a simple example, I have to go back to the grooming because that's my pet research. Grooming, what we do now is we analyze the text from a user. And then obviously you can say, oh yeah, but if you're analyzing our chat, then you can see the messages. One of the things that we did already from the beginning with that in mind is saying, okay, I'll analyze a message that is sent between two people. I analyze it, I turn that into some kind of score of how good or how bad it is, and then I'll throw the message away. I don't need it anymore because I'll turn the conversation into a risk value. And whenever the conversation up to now has a particular risk value, 7, this new message will determine if it goes up and down, and then I'll forget that message also. Now the risk is 8 or whatever. But still, I have access to the text. And so, okay, what if now we are trying to analyze Snapchat? That's end-to-end communication, end-to-end encryption on the communication. So I don't have the data anymore. Now Snapchat might not be the best example, but let's look at a game. If I know in a game or in a chat room that one person is talking to other person, I can actually start looking at that kind of behavior. I'm not interested in what I'm sending you. I'm just interested in that I'm sending you a message. And so one of the, I think, extremely interesting research that we just started 3 years ago is, what if I look at the user and I'm looking at who is this user communicating with? And how much are these people around him talking to each other? Can we say something from that? And I have to get back to grooming and not so much fraud, but if I am this is the company we're working with is a game for children 8 to 15, more or less. If I'm a normal schoolboy or girl, and I am on this game, then I will be talking to a number of my friends, a number of friends from school, a number of friends from sports, a number of family members maybe, but I have a small group. I will talk to most of them more or less in the same amounts. Yeah, sure, I have my best friend and he gets more messages, but I will talk to everybody. These people also, they will talk among each other. My friends from school, it's a group, we all are on the same game, and so they are also chatting, maybe not so much to the rest of my family, my nieces and nephews, but they will be talking together again. And so there is a high activity there. Now I'm a groomer. Okay, I'm interested in 12-year-old girls, whatever. And I'll go there and I'm going around and seeing, oh, there is a 12-year-old girl. I'll send a message to her. And I'll go, oh, there is another 12-year-old. I'll send a message to her. And so let's assume that I send the same message, hi, how are you doing, to 100 girls. First of all, there will be little or less connectivity between those because they simply, I just look around for whom I'm interested in. And so it's likely that these don't know each other or are not as connected as for the schoolboy before. But also I'll send 100 messages. How are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? There will be 80, 90 that say, I don't know that guy or that person. I'm a 12-year-old boy myself also all of a sudden. I don't know that boy, and so they will not react. There will be 10, 15, 20 that say, I don't know you, who are you? I am this and this, and are you interested in chatting with me? And then again, out of these 15, there are 1 or 2 that might say, oh yeah, that's interesting, a new friend, and the rest just shuts down. And then with these 1 or 2, I will have a long conversation. So there were, for the schoolboy, the chat pattern was relatively flat. There is some difference, of course. For this groomer, all of a sudden, the pattern is completely different. There is a large amount of very, very short conversations, and there is a very small amount of very long conversations. So it's a very skewed pattern. Now, all of a sudden, I haven't looked at any of the messages. I did not look if that was an inappropriate message or it's just, hey, how are you doing? Or I have 2 cats at home, whatever. I don't care. Just by looking at how they behave, I say, hey, this is a person that is behaving different from other persons, a normal person. Doesn't mean that this is a bad person, by the way. Yeah. This is behavior that I expect from a groomer. But what if I'm what if I am that 12-year-old schoolboy who is interested in vacation in Iceland? And so I'm going around, are you interested? Are you interested? Are you interested? And again, the same idea, same thing might happen. Most of the people will not react. Some of them will have a short conversation. But I'll find my one person that is also interested in vacation in Iceland, and we'll have a longer conversation. Yeah. Again, very skewed pattern. But that's why, in all cases, I think it's important. Not just grooming, but fraud and whatever. There should always be a moderator involved. If my machine, my AI, would at some point say, hey, Eva, you are a groomer or you are performing fraud, and everybody would point at you and say, oh, that's a bad person.
So there needs to be kind of a human Or does it need to be a human? The moderator?
Yes, it needs to be a human.
It needs to be
because
human.
if the machine will say that you're a groomer,
Yeah.
and then everybody will look at you and say, "Oh, that's a bad person."
Yeah.
But if the next day I say,
Yeah.
made a mistake, sorry,
Right.
nobody will get that message. Everybody will say that, okay, when there is smoke, there is fire.
Yeah.
So we need the human in the loop to make that last decision. Luckily, I had a few student projects. One I called the ranking the stars, the other needle in the haystack. It's more or less the same. So the idea was that if I evaluate a user or a conversation, what I'm looking for is very uncommon, the needle in the haystack. So there is not a lot of bad conversation, luckily, which makes it also more difficult to find them. But if we have something and we say that, okay, these 100 conversations, I evaluated all the conversations, these 100 conversations seem to be bad. The human will look at that, and then 98, 99 times it says, oh yeah, that's bad, and take action. 1 or 2 times it says, oh no, there was nothing there. It was just a quirk from the algorithm. And so they can then just let that go. Same for the users. If I point at 100 users and say, oh, these are bad people, kick them out of your platform, you have to look at them because it's a machine doing something. The machine can be wrong, and you don't want certainly not pointing a finger and saying he's a groomer or he's performing fraud or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's an important remark. Like it's also an ethical. It has to do with the ethics of the process. That it's always difficult to have a machine decide whether something nefarious is going on, while in reality the machine detects the anomaly, and the human can then classify that behavior as, well, this is really something bad, and this is not something bad.
Yeah, an anomaly doesn't mean bad by default, indeed.
Exactly.
Anomaly can be bad, obviously, but an anomaly could be just a person behaving different. So going to the online banking the person who just, whenever it comes to his mind, goes to the online bank and does something very short, and sometimes a lot and sometimes a little. So that's behavior that it would not be, I would think, not be classified as typical, and hence it might detect something like that.
Exactly. So it's safe to say, I reckon, the vast majority of anomalous behavior is not criminal or bad at all.
Exactly.
It is just abnormal behavior.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the tools are in principle there to not make the decision. The tools are there to help the human moderators or investigators or whatever you want to call them. So again, back to the needle in the needle in the haystack. That's why I call it like that. You have this whole haystack with conversations that is going on, and there are some bad conversations in there. As a normal moderator, I will just pick something from that haystack. Oh no, that's hay, no problem. And I'll pick something that's hay. And I have to pick a lot of times because the number of bad conversations is luckily very low. At some point, oh yeah, that's a needle and I can do something with it.
Yeah.
The AI only helps to say that, okay, there is a lot of hay that we can put aside already. And here in this thing that is left over, the concentration of needles is way higher than we had in the beginning.
Right.
So we're weeding out actually the normal, but what is left is still a lot of normal, but with a high concentration of bad. And obviously my goal is to have that concentration as high as possible, because if at the end still you have to look at investigate 5 users before you find one who is a grooming or was a fraud, performing fraud, it's still the case that you at some point you get fed up with this. If it's turned around, every 5 cases that you investigate, there is one that you say, but this is nothing. That's okay because you have good results.
Yeah. I think all the fraud people listening to you right now will completely understand what you're saying, right? I think this is bearing on grooming as much as it has on fraud.
Yeah. Because
that's what it is in essence.
There is a difference. One difference there is that the person investigating the fraud, that's easy. Okay, that's fraud, I'll take action. That's fraud, I'll take action.
Yeah.
In grooming, these conversations are really not the nicest one to read. And so if you before you had to read 100 conversations, which 99 were normal and one was bad, that was the last one was not okay, of course, but you have a lot of distraction in between. But if I give you 100 conversations and 99 are grooming, you will go home feeling really terrible.
Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah, that is a very fair remark, right? It's a very fair remark.
I don't have a solution to that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So.
Well, like you said, you're a scientist, right? You come up with new solutions to existing problems, and it's then up to other people to implement those solutions into practical situations, and they have to do with all the other stuff around there, including maybe the ethics and so on. So my final question to you is, Patrick, so how do you see the future? We've talked about modeling, machine learning, about evolved versions of deep learning and even AI going on nowadays, the applicability on 2 different use cases. Where is it going? Where are you investing your efforts in the next few years?
My efforts will be more on this connectivity that I talked about for the grooming. That kind of approach is on the one hand mathematical, although I left mathematics 40 years ago, but it is still really interesting for me. It will give you information without really getting the private information involved. Where can I use it? I can use that in a lot of different areas. I've been doing also behavioral analysis. I've been looking at students cheating, but not just the students that are bad because they are buying reports from these paper mills or using LLMs now these days. But how about the professors? Not me, but the other ones. There are actually at NTNU, there is a case where a professor a couple of years ago, he had a publication every 1.5 days. That's simply not possible. Obviously, you work together with a lot of people, so it's not that you only have to do that, other people will write it, but a publication every 1.5 days for a full year, that's very odd. So actually the current research that I'm doing is looking at papers that are written by academics. Who wrote those papers? How are these people connected? And again, I look at the connections between people. You can buy these days. You can buy authorship of a particular paper. So somebody wrote a paper. They claim that it will be published, and then the 6 places of authorships are all open, and the first author is a lot of money. It costs a lot of money, and then gets less and less. And then I think the last one is a bit more expensive again.
Wow.
And that happens. But all of a sudden, I'm publishing with people that I've never published with, that in an area that I don't publish in. That kind of anomalies will be able, again, when we model this as nodes and connections between nodes, users and connections between users and papers and connections between all of that. So that's my personal research that I'm into. Another, and I think that holds for a larger community also, is this use of large language models. And I'm very skeptical there. My skepticism is a large language model generates an answer. So I've seen a paper, I haven't studied it yet, but I've seen a paper where they were actually doing iris recognition using these large language models. So you get something like, okay, here I have an iris here I have an image of an iris, and here I have an image of an iris. Is that the same iris? And that sounds easy, and you can ask an LLM that, a large language model, that they can evaluate images now also, so that's not a problem. So I can ask it if this is from the same person. And there is some process inside this large language model going on, and then once that process is done, with the input and the internal processing, it will start generating an answer. And that's the key word, it starts generating an answer. And it generates an answer by word, adding it to the sentence, and then determining based on the sentences that I have so far, what is the most likely word. It doesn't always pick the most likely word, but it can have some creativity. It takes a second or the third or whatever, but it takes a highly likely word. So from that internal state of the analysis and of my question, it starts generating an answer. What if it once generates the answer, yeah, this is most likely from the same person. And the next time it generates on the exact same input. It generates, because there is some freedom in there, it generates the answer, no, this is most likely from a different person. So how can I trust that there is, in fact, a correct answer from the large language model?
Right.
Having said that, going back to the grooming, for the grooming we want early detection. So that's what we did with the risk already. There, I think that a large language model could again be, if we solve this problem of having different answers and when I ask the same question twice, I could ask it actually more. A large language model talks to you. It generates an answer that is like a normal conversation. So I could ask it also, okay, if you go through this conversation, at what point are you convinced that this is a grooming conversation and why? And that is something that a normal machine learning algorithm will not give you.
Right.
It comes with a value. It's a
Exactly.
grooming conversation. Oh yeah, 0.7. More closer to 1 than to 0, so that's grooming. But I have no idea what it triggered on.
Yeah.
I can ask that to the LLM.
Yeah.
So that's actually a number of research topics that we now define for the students for next year. And then hopefully there will be some students that pick up on those topics.
That will be fantastically useful because, as you probably know, from a law and regulation perspective, transparency and explainability is so very important. And like you, we live lives where we are very often confronted with something that we don't know why these decisions were ever made, because they were made by an algorithm which had no explainability.
Exactly.
Right. So
yeah.
I think this is tremendously important. Yeah. So thank you so much for this conversation. So for Fusion Fireside, this is Ewart Driehuis. Check out other episodes on www.threatfabric.com and thank you for watching.